The wind wailed through the god's wood of Winterfell as the last red leaves clung to the ancient heart tree, trembling in the northern chill. The moon, pale as old bone, hung low over the battlements, its light a sickle of sorrow across the frozen fields. In the old crypts, where the dead of House Stark slept and dreamed in stone, there was a silence so deep it seemed to reach the marrow. But even that silence quivered, disturbed by the breath of living men above. Men who remembered, men who grieved, men who yearned for blood. The snows had begun early that year, blanketing the land in a shroud that dulled sound and smothered hope. From the battlements, Jon Snow watched the fields beyond the walls, his breath clouding before him. Ghost sat at his side, silent and vigilant, the white direwolf's red eyes burning with the promise of vengeance. Jon's hand drifted through Ghost's fur, as much for his own comfort as for the beast's. There was a tension in the wolf. Something old, something wild. Jon felt it in himself too. The world had changed. Robb was dead, slain at the Twins with his wolf and his mother, their bodies despoiled, their banners torn. But the story had not ended in that slaughter. Word had flown north, swift and terrible, and what the Southron lords thought to be the doom of House Stark was, instead, its awakening. Jon had not been alone when he returned to Winterfell, and the castle was no longer empty. Sansa had arrived with a retinue of battered men sworn to her cause, bearing the scars of the Vale and the bite of winter. Arya had come, hard-eyed and quiet, with a cloak of black feathers and a whisper of blood on her blade. Bran and Rickon, thought dead, had reappeared as if out of legend, their return a mystery wrapped in riddles. And with each of them, the direwolves, those fabled, spectral beasts of the old gods, roamed the halls and forests of Winterfell as if they had claimed the north itself. The council chamber was lit by a score of torches, their flames licking at the gloom. Sansa presided at the head of the table, her face a mask of calm. Arya, restless, traced patterns in the wood with a dagger point. Bran sat in a wheeled chair carved from ancient weirwood, his gaze distant and deep. While Rickon, wild as a wolf pup, crouched by the hearth with Shaggy Dog at his feet. Jon entered, Ghost pacing at his heels. The room fell quiet. Sansa's eyes found his. "Have you heard from the watchmen at the last hearth?" He nodded. "Umber rides. Their banners are yours, Lady Stark. Lord Wyman sends word from White Harbor. He will march as soon as the river breaks." "Then?" Arya's lip curled in a half-smile. "The North remembers. They say it everywhere now." Jon leaned his knuckles on the table. "We are united at last. But so are our enemies. The Freys are dug in at the Twins. Roose Bolton holds Moat Cailin, and Ramsay is Lord of Winterfell in name, though the snows have kept him in his keep. And Walder Frey is protected by every oathbreaker who knelt at Robb's table and drew steel at his back." Rickon's growl was echoed by Shaggy Dog, a low, savage rumble. Sansa's jaw set hard. "Robb died with his wolf. Mother died for us. The Lannisters laugh, and the Freys think the North is broken. But the North is not dead. We are not dead. We are here." Her eyes glinted, blue and cold. "We are Starks, all of us. And this is our land." Bran's gaze seemed to pierce the shadows. "The wolves are restless," he murmured. "The pack is not meant to be broken. When they come together they will howl, and the old gods will listen." Jon straightened. "Then we act. We gather the bannermen. We send word to the Crannogmen, to the mountain clans, to every true son and daughter of the North. We make them remember the price of treachery. The Red Wedding must be answered." Arya slid the dagger into its sheath. "I want to be the one to cut Lord Walder's throat." Jon's voice was quiet. "You may have your chance, Arya. But this time, we do not fight alone. We have the wolves." Outside in the pale moonlight, the direwolves ranged beneath the trees. Ghost, gray and silent. Nymeria, huge and fierce, her coat as wild as her namesake. Summer, whose golden eyes watched the shadows. And Shaggy Dog, black and savage, his loyalty as fierce as his rage. The wolves ran with the wind, their howls echoing across the snows, calling to something ancient and terrible. The North remembered. Dawn came cold and gray, frost limning the battlements. Word spread like fire, riders from Deepwood Motte, from Bear Island, from the Dreadfort itself, carrying secret messages. In the great hall, the Stark children broke their fast together for the first time in years, each bearing the weight of their memories and the scars of loss. Arya's face was shadowed with old anger, Sansa's with wisdom beyond her years. Rickon grinned wolfishly, all teeth and mischief, but his eyes watched, always watched. As the day wore on, men began to arrive. First, the Manderlys, tall and fat and fierce, their banners stitched with silver mermen. Then the Umbers, the mountain clans, the flinty men of the hills. Sir Roderick Castle limped into the hall with his beard like a snowdrift, and the wildling spearwives stood in the shadows, fierce as eagles. Each swore the old oath: blood for blood, honor for honor, Stark for Stark. In the Godswood, Bran closed his eyes and dreamed of wolves. He saw them running through forests, padding through snowdrifts, their senses sharp with hunger and rage. He felt the pull of the earth, the drumbeat of old magic stirring. The trees whispered to him of vengeance, of the red harvest to come. And when he woke, there was a taste of blood on his tongue, and the certainty of doom in his heart. That night, the pack gathered. Nymeria came first, huge and wild, her eyes reflecting the firelight. Summer, lean and watchful, flanked her. Shaggy Dog prowled the shadows, tongue lolling. Ghost, silent as death, pressed close to Jon's knee. Bran watched them with a longing he could not name. He felt Summer's thoughts as his own. A hunger, a yearning for the hunt. The Stark siblings knelt together before the heart tree. Sansa led the prayer, her words soft and fierce. Old gods, hear us. We are your children, lost but not broken. Give us the strength to avenge our kin, to drive out those who have wronged us, to bring justice to this land. Let the wolves run free, and let the North remember. The wind stirred, cold and sharp, as if the gods themselves answered. Over the next weeks, the preparations began in earnest. Jon drilled the men in the yard, his sword singing through the air. Arya vanished into the town, gathering secrets from the serving girls and smiths. Sansa worked with Maester Luwin's successor, sending messages in cipher and receiving quiet pledges of loyalty. Rickon and Bran, wild as wolf pups, haunted the forests and marshes, their bond with the Direwolves deepening. Sometimes at twilight, Bran would fall silent and still, and when he woke, he would speak of things he should not know, of foes gathering at Moat Cailin, of whispers in the woods near the Twins. There was an old power in the land, and it was stirring. A council was held beneath the banner of the Direwolf. Lord Wyman Manderly, thick of neck and jowl, spoke first. Walder Frey will not leave the safety of the Twins. His sons and grandsons ride, but the old man is wily as a fox, and Roose Bolton is colder than the others, with his bastard at his side. Jon's eyes narrowed. We do not need to storm the Twins. We bleed them first, cut off their food, their trade, their gold. Arya can slip inside, unseen. Ghost and the wolves can harry their patrols. We turn their strength against them. Damn. Sansa nodded. Lady Stoneheart has been seen in the Riverlands, striking at the Freys. If we join her, we can split their strength, and the Riverlords will rise. A murmur rippled through the hall. Arya's eyes glimmered at the name. Mother is dead, she whispered. Or something else. Jon looked away. He had seen too much to doubt the impossible. We use every tool, every ally. The North is united at last. We ride south, not as an army, but as a pack. The wolves go before us. The first snows of winter fell as the banners were raised. Riders sped across the land, warning the villages to hide their food, to gather arms, to watch for Freys and Boltons. Arya and Rickon vanished one night, taking Nymeria and Shaggy Dog. Bran dreamed of rivers red with blood, of wolves tearing flesh from bone. Sansa wept alone at the heart tree, her grief too great to share. On the day of departure, Jon stood at the gate, armoring himself with grim resolve. Ghost paced beside him, his hackles raised. Sansa embraced him, fierce and brief. Bring them justice. she whispered. For Rob. For Mother. He nodded. For all of us. The march south was cold and quiet. The wolves ranged ahead, silent as mist. The bannermen followed, their faces set and grim. The riverlands were broken and wild, the scars of war still fresh. Fields lay fallow, villages burned, but in the forests the wolves hunted. Frey's Boltons, Lannister men, any who bore the sigil of the usurpers. Rumors spread like wildfire. A Frey patrol found with throats torn out, their horses scattered. A Bolton raiding party slaughtered in the dark, the only survivor mad with fear, babbling of red eyes and silver fangs. In the night, the howls echoed from river to hill, a promise of death. At the twins, Walder Frey fretted and cursed, his cupbearers cringing. He had doubled the guards, barred the gates, and sent for Lannister gold. But the wolves were not deterred by walls. The first snows fell thick and heavy, blinding the eyes of the sentries. Food grew scarce. Men disappeared in the night, dragged screaming into the darkness. Arya came in silence, a shadow among shadows. She found her way into the kitchens, into the cellars, into the hidden rooms where the Freys kept their secrets. With her, Nymeria crept, huge, wild, and terrible. The servants whispered of a ghost in the halls, a girl with eyes like the grave, and a wolf at her side. Bran watched through Summer's eyes as the pack closed in. He felt the thrill of the hunt, the hot rush of blood. He saw Rickon and Shaggy Dog in the woods, tearing down a Frey courier. He felt Arya's cold resolve, her hatred sharp as her blade. He whispered to the trees, and they listened. Jon led the northern host to Moat Cailin, where Roose Bolton had made his camp. The bastards of the Dreadfort jeered from the ramparts, but Jon was unmoved. He sent Ghost into the night, and the White Wolf found his way past the traps and spikes. At dawn, the men awoke to screams. The bastard of Bolton's favored hounds had been slain, their carcasses flayed and left at the gates. Ramsay raged, but Roose only grew colder. "We hold the moat," he said. "The Starks are weak. Their wolves are only beasts." But the men remembered the old tales. They remembered the kings of winter, and the nights when Direwolves ran beneath the moon. They watched Ghost, his red eyes bright as coals, and they began to fear. The siege began as winter deepened. Jon's men cut the roads, poisoned the wells, burned the outlying farms. Every night, the wolves hunted, their howls raising terror in the hearts of Bolton men. Sansa's letters went out to the lords of the Vale, to Lady Stoneheart in the Riverlands, to every Stark ally. Supplies dwindled. Hope withered. In the nights, Bran's dreams grew strange and powerful. He saw through the eyes of birds, of wolves, of men. He spoke with the old gods, who whispered of vengeance and justice. He saw the twins awash in blood, the Freys torn from their towers. He saw the Direwolves, united at last, feasting in the halls of their enemies. The North was awake. The pack was whole again. At the twins, Walder Frey grew thin and gaunt, his sleep haunted by dreams of wolves. His sons whispered of rebellion, of abandoning the castle to the Starks. But Walder clung to his power, his greed, his terror. He sent for more men, more gold, more food. But the roads were closed, the rivers frozen, the land turning against him. One night, as the storm howled outside, Arya crept into the great hall, Nymeria at her side. She wore the face of a serving girl, her eyes cold as the snow. Walder feasted alone, his kin dead or fled. He drank bitter wine, his hand trembling. "Come, girl," he barked. "Bring me more." She did. She poured the wine, and when he looked up, she drew her blade and slit his throat from ear to ear. Nymeria leapt, her jaws closing on his throat, her teeth rending flesh from bone. The last of the Freys died screaming, and Arya stood over his corpse, her face splattered with blood, her eyes shining with savage joy. Outside, the wolves howled, and the North remembered. The word spread swiftly. Walder Frey was dead. The twins were broken, their banners torn, their gold stolen. The Stark banners rose above the towers once more, and the Direwolves prowled the halls. The River Lords, emboldened, struck at every Frey outpost. driving the usurpers from their land. At Moat Cailin, Jon pressed the siege. Roose Bolton, cold and cunning, saw the doom closing about him. Ramsay, maddened by fear, rode out to hunt Ghost. But the White Wolf lured him into the marshes. There Rickon and Shaggy Dog waited. The bastard Bolton died as he had lived, screaming, torn by teeth and claw. Jon sent Roose a message, written in blood on Bolton banners. The North remembers. That winter was long and cruel, but in the end, the North endured. The Direwolves roamed free, their howls a song of vengeance. The Starks, united at last, reclaimed their birthright, their house restored, not by the sword alone, but by the wild justice of the old gods and the savage loyalty of the pack. In the heart of Winterfell, beneath the ancient trees, the Starks gathered once more. Jon, Sansa, Arya, Bran, and Rickon, with the Direwolves at their side. They knelt before the heart tree and swore a new oath. One not of vengeance, but of unity, of family, of home. And in the darkness, the wolves watched, and the old god smiled. Ah. K. The wind keened down from the high moors and swept over Winterfell's battlements, bearing with it the sound of 100 hammers, 1,000 axes biting into old wood, the clamor of forges, the chorus of a castle waking to life and war. Snowflakes drifted from the sky in slow, silent spirals, frosting the black slates of the great keep and mantling the statues in the godswood, until even the stone direwolf on the crypt steps looked ready to spring. Within the walls, a new rhythm beat, fiercer, louder, but steadier, as if the heart of the Old North had started beating again. Sansa stood in the solar, her fingers wrapped around a steaming cup, watching through narrow panes as men mustered in the courtyard. The banners of Manderley, Glover, Tallheart, and Mormont hung beside the direwolf of Stark. Everywhere, the badge of the wolf. Even the wildlings who had come with Jon wore scraps of fur and bone, tokens of the old gods, sworn now to Winterfell as kin. Below, Jon moved among them, armored in dark gray steel chased with black, Ghost at his side. He nodded to a spearwife from the frozen woods, exchanged a word with Wyman Manderley's second son, and paused as Glover's master-at-arms bowed low. The men looked to him not just as a Stark, but as the spearpoint of their vengeance, a living banner, one that would not bend nor break. Jon bore it lightly, but in his eyes lingered the weight of everything lost. Robb, their mother, the quiet, battered honor of House Stark. In the shadows behind, Arya watched too, but she watched the way a wolf watches, learning the measure of the men, their tempers, their strengths, their weaknesses. Nymeria had vanished into the forests again, gathering her own wild pack, yet Arya was never quite alone. Servants flinched from her stare, and even the most hardened mountain men remembered the tales. How she'd killed the heads of House Frey in their own hall, how she moved silent as a wraith and struck as swift as winter's chill. Bran spent his days beneath the heart tree, roots cold beneath his hands, his head tilted back and white eyes seeing far beyond the castle walls. He watched the passage of crows over the twins, saw men die in ditches, glimpsed Roose Bolton sitting in candlelit silence, his face a mask of pale indifference, and sometimes, just sometimes, Bran glimpsed the shapes of other wolves moving through the woods, gray, white, black, closing in. Rickon stalked the kennels and the godswood with Shaggy Dog at his heels, wild and unbroken. The castle men kept out of his way, but the youngest Stark had become a symbol, a legend for the children who'd survived the sack of their villages, the little ones who watched him with wide, hungry eyes, and whispered he was the spirit of the North reborn. He liked that. He liked the way the wolves had become a shadow army, more feared than the swordsmen who rode south beneath the wolf banners. Knights brought tales to the hall, fires high and ale flowing. Bards sang of Robb's victories and the old kings of winter. The men roared for vengeance, for justice, for Stark. Yet always, behind the merriment, was the knowledge of what still lay ahead. The North was rising, yes, but the Freys and Boltons still held their castles. The Lannisters still sat the Iron Throne, and beyond the wall, something older and darker than any wolf or man waited in the cold. As the moon waned, Sansa summoned the lords to the great chamber. The fire blazed high, painting the stones in gold and crimson. She stood beneath the carved direwolf, regal as any queen, her copper hair a burning brand in the dark. The Red Wedding was not just an attack on House Stark, she said, her voice cutting through the murmurs. It was an attack on the North, on every one of you who bent the knee to my brother, who gave oaths of loyalty and friendship. They murdered our kin and called it justice. They thought to break us. She let the silence hang. Eyes shone in the gloom, hungry for her words. They failed. They made us wolves. We will not rest until every debt is paid in blood and fire. The twins have fallen. The Freys are dead or scattered, and now the Boltons are all that remain. My mother's shade haunts the Riverlands, hunting those who betrayed us. We will finish what she began. Done. Wyman Manderley, great and broad and bearded, banged his fist on the table. The Manderless remember my lady. My sons ride for you. We will feast on the flesh of our enemies before the new moon. Meg Mormont, stern as the sea, rose next. Bear Island stands with Winterfell. The Lannisters sent us nothing but grief. We will give them grief in turn. One by one, the other lords voiced their fealty, their swords, their hearts. Even the wildlings muttered, Stark, in their broken tongue, eyes darting to Jon. But it was Jon who stood last, when all the others had pledged, his voice measured, grave. We are the last of our house, but our house was never only the blood of Stark. It was the spirit of the North, the bonds between us. The wolves run together, and together we will bring down the ones who betrayed us. We march on Moat Cailin at first thaw.I. The Freys are broken. The Boltons are next. After that, we see what the gods will. And no one spoke of what would come if the Lannisters sent an army. No one spoke of winter's true depths, nor the tales Bran told when his eyes went white. The men left the chamber burning with resolve, but Sansa lingered, looking into the flames. Jon joined her. You speak as well as father ever did. Her lips curved in a tired, knowing smile. He died for that voice. So did mother. So did Robb. We cannot afford to be children any longer, Jon. He looked at her, saw in her face both the frightened girl had once called sister and the ruler she had become. He nodded and said nothing. Snow fell, heavier now, until the world outside seemed made of white and silence. Yet still, the hosts mustered. Sansa's ravens flew, north to the last hearth and the Shadow Tower, east to White Harbor, south into the chaos of the Riverlands. Each bore the mark of the direwolf and a promise. The old ways were not dead. The North would answer. The wolves would run. Arya prepared in her own way, blending into the shadows, whispering with the wildlings and the spearwives, learning their secrets. She was everywhere and nowhere, a rumor as much as a girl. Sometimes she sparred with Jon in the yard. Fast, brutal bouts that left them both breathless. Sometimes she vanished into the Godswood for hours, coming back with blood beneath her fingernails and a look in her eye that chilled even Sansa. Bran watched her, and in the trees, Summer watched too. The wolves were growing bolder. In the dusk, they hunted together, their howls rolling across the fields, calling to something that stirred in the bones of the North. Rickon sat with the kennelmaster, cleaning blades and arrowheads, watching as Shaggy Dog led the younger wolves on hunts through the snow. Sometimes, he brought in half-wild pups, and the other children of Winterfell whispered that soon every village in the North would have a wolf again. On the eve of their departure, the Stark children gathered beneath the heart tree. Jon, Sansa, Arya, Bran, Rickon, Dada. The Direwolves moved among them, half shadow, half flesh, eyes burning in the gloom. We have lost much, Sansa said quietly, her gloved hand on the tree's cold bark. But we have each other, and we have the North. We will not lose more. Arya knelt and whispered, For Mother. For Robb. Bran touched the roots. The old gods are with us. Jon's breath steamed. Then let them watch what comes. Rickon only grinned, all teeth. Let them run. The next morning they rode out. Northmen and wildlings, spearwives and knights, all beneath the Direwolf banner. Jon rode at the head, Ghost padding beside his black destrier. Sansa rode with Manderly, her hair hidden beneath a heavy hood, her eyes bright with hope and dread. Arya was gone before dawn, her face lost to the mists. Bran rode in a carriage, Summer a silent shadow at the wheel. Rickon led the youngest men, proud and fierce, Shaggy Dog loping at his stirrup. They moved south, past ruined towns and fields choked with snow. Every village sent out its men, its grain, its grudges. Every family who'd lost kin at the Twins joined the host, bearing crude banners painted with wolves' heads or scraps of gray fur. As they passed, the children came to the roadsides and howled, their voices thin but fierce, and the men howled in answer. When they reached Moat Cailin, the Boltons waited behind their black banners. Ramsay's dogs snarling at the walls, Roose cold and still as ice. Jon called a parley. Roose met him beneath the walls, both sides bristling with steel and fury. Winterfell is mine snow, Roose said, his eyes pale and dead. The king's writ makes it so. Jon's voice was iron. The king's writ means nothing in the north. Your time is over. Surrender, and you may yet see the inside of a cell, not the inside of a grave. Roose's mouth twitched, the ghost of a smile. You're a Stark, for all you claim to be a Snow. But you were never much for the game, were you, Jon? You'll never win. Jon only turned away. We shall see. That night, the wolves ran. Ghost slipped past the battlements, his coat near invisible in the snow. Summer and Shaggy Dog found the gaps in the palisades, while Nymeria came out of the dark, her wild pack, 20 strong, swirling behind her. The sentries never saw them. The dogs howled, but the Direwolves' rage was greater. By dawn, the bodies lay sprawled in the mud. Bolton men, dogs, and more. Ramsay's favorite hound was found torn in half, and Ramsay himself locked the gates, raving. The siege began in earnest. The Northmen built great fires, sent arrows over the walls, cut the Bolton supplies. Rickon led raids by night, his wild men slipping through secret marsh paths. Arya moved through the camp, unseen, silent, striking down traitors and spies with a knife's whisper. Bran watched it all, every arrow, every secret passage, every act of cruelty or courage. Sometimes he lost himself in the ravens overhead, in the wolves below, in the deep, dreaming dark beneath the moat. Sometimes he saw through Roose's eyes and shivered at the cold in that man's soul. The Boltons grew hungry, desperate. Ramsay's men turned on each other in the night, and soon Roose had fewer men to command than he'd ever feared. Still, he held out, the king's writ in his hand, hoping for relief that would never come. One moonless night, Sansa summoned Jon to the command tent. The firelight flickered over her pale face. "We cannot wait forever," she said. "The men grow restless. If the snows deepen, we could be trapped as well." Jon nodded. "We attack tomorrow. Let the wolves lead." The assault began at dawn. Arrows darkened the sky. Rickon led the wildlings in a charge at the northern gate, Shaggy Dog tearing through the defenders. Arya, having slipped within the walls, opened the sally port, letting in Jon's picked men. Ghost and Nymeria tore through the courtyard, their fury contagious. Ramsay tried to flee but was cornered in the kennels. He raised his crossbow, but Arya's knife found his throat first. As he bled out, Nymeria and Ghost watched, their eyes cold and bright. Roose fought at the tower, killing 3 men before Jon reached him. For a moment, they faced each other in the snow. Silence between them. "Do you know why you lose?" Jon said softly. Roose's voice was a ghost. "Mercy. It is always your undoing." Jon drove Longclaw through his chest, the wolf's head hilt gleaming as Roose crumpled. It was done. The north roared as the Bolton banners fell, torn by the wind, trampled by wolves and men. The victors feasted beneath the walls that night, Sansa presiding with Jon, Arya, Bran, and Rickon beside her. Ghost and Nymeria shared the scraps with Shaggy Dog, Summer keeping silent watch. But there was no true joy. Too much had been lost. and too many deaths still lingered in the cold. When the banners of Stark were raised over Moat Cailin, the old men wept. The children cheered. The wolves howled, and the wind carried their voices all the way to the icy coast and deep woods, where the dead still waited. In the days that followed, Jon marched north again, Sansa beside him, their host swelling with every step as freed men joined their ranks. Arya scouted ahead, a ghost in the wild, Nymeria's pack trailing her. Bran rode in the wagon, his dreams growing stranger, older. Rickon, wild as ever, taught the children of every village to howl, to trust in wolves, to trust in Stark. Winterfell's gates opened before them, and the banners flew again. The gray direwolf rampant, the snow swirling behind. Sansa took her place in the solar, her voice strong, her will unyielding. Jon trained the men, rebuilt the walls, sent ravens to the Vale and beyond, seeking alliances for the new order. Arya vanished and returned with new scars, new secrets. Bran sat beneath the heart tree, listening to the whispers of the old gods, while Rickon ranged through the woods, a wolf among wolves. Peace was never certain, not truly. Raiders haunted the southern roads. Lannister envoys came, bearing threats as cold as the gold they brought. But the North stood, united and vengeful, and the memory of the Red Wedding burned like a beacon in every heart. Sometimes at night, Jon would climb the highest tower and look to the south, the wind whipping his cloak. Ghost stood with him, silent, ever watchful. Below, Winterfell glowed with life and fire. Jon wondered what Ned Stark would say if he could see them now. His children returned, his house avenged, the wolves running free. But Jon had no need for ghosts. He had family. He had the North. And in the heart of winter, with the snow thick on the fields and the banners of Stark rippling above, he had hope, hard-earned, blood-bought, unbroken as the old stones beneath his feet. The pack endures, he thought. The pack endures. And somewhere beyond the fields, in the dark woods where no man walked, the direwolves howled their answer to the sky. Ay, Ka. In the depths of that long winter, with the blood of the Boltons barely crusted on the snow and the ghosts of the Freys howling still in the dreams of the living, Winterfell drew the North to its bosom. Word went forth like fire in the wild grass. The Stark banners flew from the walls. The direwolves paced the shadows, and men who had once cursed their lot beneath the heel of the Boltons, or cowered in the ruins left by the Red Wedding, began to drift home again. War-worn, thin, but burning with the old hunger for justice. The long memory of the North, stubborn as a root, sent its tendrils into every heart. The castle that had stood empty and broken now throbbed with life. The armory rang with steel, and the godswood whispered with secrets. Each day, more men arrived, some alone, some with ragged companies, some with families trailing behind them, all bearing the scars of Frey treachery. They were fishermen from the stony coasts, herders from the rills, poachers, small folk and hedge knights, each with a story, each with a grievance, and each was met at the gates, not by cold steel, but by the cold eyes of the direwolves, the living banner of the house restored. It was Sansa who received them, her bearing queenly, her words kind but shrewd. She listened to their tales, offered bread and salt and warmth, and sent them to the quarters made ready for guests and refugees. Her presence, poised and composed, set the rhythm of the castle. Her hands moved through ledgers and missives. Her mind always 2 moves ahead of her lord's. She spoke little of the past, yet never flinched from it. Those who looked into her eyes saw the pain there, but also the steel. They called her Lady of Winter, and the name fit. Jon did not linger in the halls. He trained with the men in the courtyard, drilled the wildlings and the Northmen side by side. His word was law, but he wielded it as a shield, not a sword. The wildlings, hard-eyed, savage, respected him as a warrior and as a wolf brother. He listened to Tormund Giantsbane's counsel, to Lyanna Mormont's bold urgings, and even to the grumbling of old Lord Glover, who remembered the time before the wolves were broken. To Jon, the past was a weight, but also a spur. He would not see the house rebuilt only to fall again to southern knives. Arya haunted the halls like a shadow. Some nights she slipped away altogether, gone for days, leaving only the prints of Nymeria's enormous paws in the snow beyond the gates. When she returned, there was often a new blade at her belt, a new name on her lips, or blood under her fingernails. The castle folk grew used to her silent tread, her keen eyes. To the children, she was legend, the wolf girl, the ghost who avenged the dead. Even to Sansa, she was part stranger now. But blood called to blood, and some evenings they sat together by the kitchen hearth, sharing quiet words while the wind rattled the shutters. Bran was changed most of all. He spent hours in the Godswood, unmoving, listening to the wind through the branches, eyes white and sightless as he wandered the world in dreams. Summer never strayed far from his side, and the ravens clustered in the high branches, waiting, watching. The castle learned to move around him, to keep the noise low, to speak softly. Bran saw things no one else did: the shifting of storms in the far north, the approach of strangers through the snows, secrets whispered in locked rooms. Sansa, ever pragmatic, pressed him for news of the southern lords and the Lannister queen, and Bran gave what counsel he could, though sometimes his answers came wrapped in riddles and shadows. Rickon, the wildest, found new freedom in the open woods. He took to sleeping in the kennels, or among the Direwolves in the old tombs, hunting rabbits and wild goats, bringing his kills to the kitchens with a fierce pride. Shaggy Dog grew sleek and strong again, his black fur glistening in the torchlight. Rickon spoke little, but the men respected him as a harbinger of the old ways. A Stark, untamed by sorrow. Through that first hard month, the North reckoned itself, strand by frozen strand. There was little gold and less food, but the granaries of White Harbor sent what they could, and the Crannogmen floated barrels of smoked fish and salted frog from the neck. Sansa rationed the stores with a harsh hand, and the castle's cook, once renowned for his pies, became infamous for his stews thickened with barley and acorn. Hunger prowled, but so did hope. It was not the warm plenty of the south, but it was enough. As the snows deepened, the castle became a fortress. Scouts patrolled the King's Road. Watchmen peered from the towers, and every smith and carpenter in the north labored on the defenses. Sansa convened her council nightly. Jon at her side, Manderly and Glover across the table, wildlings at the back, silent and grim. They spoke of crops, of walls, of the raiders still loyal to the Boltons, of the southern lords who might come seeking to reclaim what they'd lost. But always, beneath the politics and the planning, was the hunger for vengeance unfulfilled. The phrase had been broken at the Twins, true, but some had fled. The Boltons were dead, but some of their men had melted into the forests. And above all, the Lannisters, fat on their stolen crown, still sent ravens north, still demanded tribute, still sent gold to buy new swords. One dawn, as the snow swirled in silent drifts, a party rode up the King's Road. Lannister men in red cloaks, 24 strong, led by a knight whose armor gleamed like beaten brass. They bore a white banner and a letter sealed with the royal lion. The gates opened, slow and heavy, and the party rode into the yard beneath the watching eyes of Northmen and Direwolves alike. The knight dismounted, helmet under one arm, and bowed low before Sansa, who waited on the steps with Ghost and Rickon at her flank. "My Lady Stark," he said, "I am Sir Kevin Hill. I bear a message from King Tommen, by order of Queen Cersei Lannister." His eyes flicked to Jon, to the Direwolves, to the grim assembly of Northmen bristling with arms. "Speak, sir," Sansa said, her voice clear and cold. Sir Kevin drew the letter and broke the seal, reading aloud. "By royal decree, Winterfell and all lands north of the Neck are held in fief to House Stark, provided you bend the knee and swear fealty to the Iron Throne. In return, His Grace promises pardon for all past offenses, the return of certain hostages, and a shipment of golden grain in the spring. Should you refuse, the Crown will send an army to reassert its rights, with all the force of the realm, to reassert its rights, with all the force of the realm." He looked up, lips tight. "These are the terms, my lady. For a moment, all was silent, but the hush of the falling snow. Jon stepped forward, his voice low but carrying. "Tell your queen the North remembers. Tell her we are wolves, not lapdogs. There will be no more oaths, no more betrayals. If she sends an army, she will find only graves." Kevan's mouth tightened. "The Lannisters have long arms, Lord Snow." Sansa's eyes were blue ice. "Not long enough to choke the North. Take our answers south." The envoy was given bread and salt, water and shelter for the night, and rode out the next morning beneath a sky the color of old steel. As the gates closed behind them, Sansa turned to Jon, her mouth set in a line of resolve. "They will come," she said. "Sooner or later. We must be ready." Jon nodded, glancing to where Arya watched from the shadow of the stable. "We will be." The days darkened. Winter's heart beat slower, heavier, the nights longer than the days. But the North endured. Scouts returned from the south with tales of a Lannister host gathering at Harrenhal, of sellswords crossing the narrow sea, of southern lords squabbling over the ruins of the Riverlands. But they also brought news of unrest, of peasant uprisings, of whispers that the old magic was stirring in the land. Arya left again, taking only Nymeria and a handful of wildlings. She rode hard for the Riverlands, slipping through the war-ravaged country by night. In the ruins of a half-burned inn, she found Lady Stoneheart. Her mother, yet not her mother. Her face gray and bloodless. With her rode the Brotherhood without banners, grim and ruthless. Arya knelt before the shade of Catelyn Stark, her voice a whisper. "The North rises, mother. The Freys are dead, the Boltons too. The Lannisters come." Lady Stoneheart's dead eyes fixed on hers. More blood. More vengeance. Arya bowed her head. "It will be done." She rode with the Brotherhood for a time, hunting down the last Freys, cutting down bands of broken men who preyed on the weak. She left the Stark banner on every corpse, a message written in blood. The North remembers. Back at Winterfell, Sansa's council met nightly. Manderly pressed for alliances with the Vale and White Harbor. Glover urged caution. "Let the Southerners bleed each other dry before we move." Lyanna Mormont, small and fierce, declared, "We stand or fall as wolves, not sheep." Even the wildlings had their say, grimly promising that the old gods would send omens if the time for war had come. Bran, ever still, saw more than they knew. He saw armies moving through the snow, crows feasting on the dead, fires burning in the night. He saw a shadow on the wall, cold and immense, and the face of a boy he'd once called brother. Jon, standing before it, sword drawn, ghost at his side. He saw Arya, a whisper in the darkness, her face streaked with tears, her hands stained red. He saw Rickon, wild-eyed, running with the wolves in the endless woods, a king among beasts. And he saw Sansa, regal on her throne, her hair white with snow, her eyes full of sorrow and strength. He told Sansa of his dreams, but she heard only the part she needed. "The Lannisters will come. They will bleed us if they can. We must be stronger." So the work continued. The walls were thickened. Every hearth was watched. Every child was taught to howl. Then, in the dead of night, a horn sounded from the watchtower. 3 blasts, echoing through the stone. Men tumbled from their beds, hands to sword, hearts in their throats. Jon was first to the battlements, ghost a pale shadow at his side. In the dim pre-dawn, torches flickered on the road, and shapes moved through the drifting snow. Hundreds, perhaps thousands, a host come north. Lannisters, someone whispered. Jon shook his head, eyes narrowing. No, not Lannisters. Then, as the host drew closer, banners became visible, ragged but familiar. White falcons, tridents, mermen, and one gray direwolf. Sansa came to his side, cloak flapping in the wind. "The Vale," she breathed. "The River Lords. They come to us." At the head of the column rode Petyr Baelish, face smooth as ever, the mockingbird pin bright at his throat. Behind him rode Sir Brynden Tully, grim and fierce, flanked by men of the Riverlands. Lord Jan Royce, plate gleaming, led the knights of the Vale. There were men from the Manderleys, from the Cranogs, even a few black brothers from the Wall. They had come through hardship and snow, called by Sansa's letters, by rumor, by the promise of vengeance. Winterfell opened its gates. The hall blazed with warmth, packed with men and banners. Petyr Baelish bent the knee to Sansa. His words honeyed but his eyes sharp. "For the Lady of Winterfell, for the true North, for the blood of Stark," he proclaimed. Sir Brynden gripped Jon's forearm, the Blackfish's eyes bright with fierce pride. "Your father would be proud," he said, voice rough. "But pride is not enough. The realm must be cleansed." Jan Royce bowed to Sansa. "The Vale flies at your command, my lady. Give the word, and we ride." The council was crowded, voices loud, tempers high. Sansa presided, calm and stern. "We hold the North," she said. "We do not kneel to the Iron Throne, but we do not march blindly into death. Our strength lies here. If the Lannisters come, we bleed them. If the Riverlords are ready to rise, let us rise together." Jon leaned forward, eyes shadowed. "If we fight as wolves. We do not let the Southerners divide us again." Then now, Arya returned from her hunt, slipped in at the back, her face shadowed, her eyes hungry. "No one who betrays us lives," she said softly. Bran spoke last, his voice distant, strange. "The world is changing. The North must endure. The wolves must run together or all is lost." The meeting ended with a new oath. Riverlord and Northman, knight and wildling, all sworn to House Stark, to the blood and the bone of the Old North. The pack had grown, its teeth bared. As the Lannister army crossed the neck, as gold bought new swords in the south, as whispers of dragons circled from across the sea, Winterfell stood defiant, a fortress of stone and blood, ringed by wolves, crowned by banners. Sansa watched from her tower, eyes fixed on the storm gathering to the south, and knew the battle was not yet done. But she was ready, and her pack was with her. In the Godswood, beneath the blood-red leaves, Bran listened to the old gods. In the snowy fields, Rickon ran wild, Shaggy Dog and his kin at his side. In the shadows, Arya sharpened her blade, her heart set on vengeance. And in the highest tower, Jon watched the dawn break over the north. A pale, cold light, but unbroken. He felt Ghost press close, warm and alive. He thought of Ned and Catelyn, of Robb and all the dead, and swore once more to stand as Wolfen Stark, unbowed, unbroken. So the North remembered, and the Direwolves howled. The pack endured, awaiting the storm. Aika. Winter's hand pressed down harder as the days crawled forward, and the sunlight over Winterfell was wan and weak. A distant coin glimpsed through veils of drifting snow. Smoke from the castle's hundreds of hearths rose in slow gray plumes, lost to the sky before they could touch the clouds. In the yard, men stamped and cursed to keep feeling in their hands. The armory echoed with the sound of steel, and the kitchen steamed with the effort of feeding so many hungry mouths. A city had grown behind Winterfell's walls, a city of warriors, refugees, orphans, and lords, all hemmed close by the cold and the threat from the south. The Direwolves haunted the woods and courtyards, bold as ever. Ghost's white shadow slipped between the tents, his muzzle often flecked with blood from his nightly hunts. Nymeria kept to the wild, her pack swelling with every moon. Wolf dogs, half-wolves, strays drawn by her ferocity. The small folk whispered that the old magic was thick in the air again, that the land itself had awakened with the return of the Starks, and that as long as the wolves endured, so too would the North. In the solar, Sansa held council. Petyr Baelish moved through the chamber like a dancer among flames, his smile ever present, his eyes ever calculating. Jan Royce pressed for immediate action. Strike south, while the Vale Knights were strong, and the Lannister army still mustered at Harrenhal. The Blackfish urged caution, his years of war and exile etched deep into his face. Lord Manderley, broad as a bear, offered ships and silver, but his voice was slow and careful. He'd lost too many sons to blood and southern ambition. Sansa listened, her hands folded atop the map of the north. She said little, letting the men talk themselves out, weighing every word. The cold, clear light from the windows caught the red in her hair and limned her cheekbones in silver. When at last the lords fell silent, she spoke. "The North is not a blade to be drawn for pride," she said. "It is a pack. If we leave Winterfell undefended, the Lannisters will sweep north like fire. If we waste our strength on raids, we bleed ourselves for their pleasure. We have one duty: survival. The North endures, not because we are bold, but because we are patient." Petyr Baelish's lips curved. "And yet, my lady, winter is not endless. Hunger grows, loyalties fray." Sansa's gaze found his, calm and unblinking. "So does desperation. I know hunger, Lord Baelish. So do all who survived the Boltons and the frays. Let the Lannisters starve in their camps. Let the southern lords grow weary and cold. If they come, we will break them not with swords, but with winter." Then Manderley thumped the table. "She speaks true. Let them freeze and curse the day they marched against the North." So it was settled, for now. They would not march south. They would hold Winterfell as the pack once did, tight and ready, jaws closed, waiting for weakness. Sansa left the lords to their complaints and wandered the yard, her boots crunching in the snow. Children played at swords beneath the watchful eyes of wildlings and Manderley guards. Smoke poured from the smithy. The bells in the sept rang for the dead. Another old woman lost to cold and hunger. She paused at the godswood, looking through the bare red branches to where Bran sat beneath a heart tree. Summer curled at his feet, his face lost to dreams. Bran saw her coming, though his eyes did not move. "They gather at Moat Cailin," he said quietly, "but they are not all Lannisters. Some wear banners I have not seen since Robb's march." Sansa's breath misted. "Southern lords." "Seeking pardon." Bran nodded. "They come for hope, but they bring only war." Sansa pressed her fingers to the weirwood bark, rough and cold. "Will we survive?" Bran's voice was distant, echoing with the strange music of the old gods. "If the pack stays together." She squeezed his hand once and left him to his dreams. Arya drifted between the walls and woods, always silent, always near. She slept little, her dreams broken by memories of blood and water, of faces worn and discarded. She watched the Lannister envoy as they passed south, marked the faces of the men, memorized their gaits, their scars, their fears. She found herself in the kitchens, in the stables, on the ramparts beside Jon as he patrolled the walls. Jon had grown leaner in the winter. There was a new hardness in him, a quiet resolve. He moved among his men with Ghost close at heel, giving orders, listening to worries, binding wounds, and doling out punishments as needed. The wildlings respected him, for he kept his word. The Northmen trusted him, for he was Ned Stark's son in all but name. To Sansa, he was more than a brother. He was her sword, her shield, the keeper of her father's memory. Rickon, wild and unbroken, patrolled the outer woods, his cloak black as shaggy dog's fur. He hunted deer with the wolf pack, brought meat for the tables, and taught the orphans of the castle how to move silently, how to run when the horns blew, how to find shelter in the deepest snow. The children loved him for his wildness, and the old men whispered that the blood of the first man ran hot in him. The moon turned and turned again. The Vale Knights grew restless, their lances bright and sharp. The Blackfish sent his scouts south, bringing word of Lannister movements, of sellsword companies bought and broken, of skirmishes in the neck. Baelish plotted and whispered, always seeking a path to greater power. But Sansa watched him closely. She knew his tricks now. She had learned from the best. Then the snows eased, just for a day, and a rider came from the south, caked in mud, half frozen, his cloak torn and his horse stumbling. The guards brought him to John, who saw at once that this was no southerner but a Northman, Ben Bones, who'd ridden with Robb at the Green Fort. He fell to his knees in the hall, his voice ragged. "They come, my lord, the Lannisters, half the Riverlands behind them, led by Jaime himself. 3,000 horse, twice as many foot." Sellswards and Hedge Knights, and those red priests from the east. They mean to take Winterfell, or burn it. The hall went silent. John lifted the man to his feet. "You have done well, Ben. Rest now." He looked to Sansa, and she met his gaze. There was no fear in her now, only cold determination. "We will not break," she said. "Let them come." The days that followed were full of tension. Every man was armed, every woman ready with boiling water or sharpened blade. The children were sent to the crypts, watched by the oldest and most loyal of the house. Sansa oversaw the fortifications herself, her hands raw from the cold, her voice unwavering. John worked the men like a blacksmith at his forge, turning them into a blade that would not snap. Arya vanished into the woods, seeking out the Lannister scouts. Rickon ranged the outer fields with his wolves, harrying foraging parties, leaving no path unguarded. The banners came at last, gold and red, proud and terrible. Jaime Lannister rode at their head, his golden hand bright in the winter sun, his armor polished, his sword at his hip. He sent a herald forward, demanding the surrender of Winterfell in the name of the king. Jon answered from the battlements, Sansa beside him. "We remember," Jon called, his voice echoing across the fields. "We remember the Red Wedding, the sack of Winterfell, the death of our kin. We remember the wolves and the north. If you want Winterfell, come and take it." The Lannister army camped beyond bowshot, their fires bright against the snows. For 3 days, they waited, building engines of war, probing the defenses, sending envoys with honeyed words and veiled threats. Sansa turned each away with the same reply. "The North does not kneel." On the 4th dawn, the horns blew, and the assault began. Drums thundered, catapults hurled fire and stone against the walls. Lannister knights rode at the gates, only to find the earth churned and slick, the ditches filled with sharpened stakes. Arrows darkened the sky. The Northmen stood firm atop the walls. The wildlings flung javelins and rocks. The women poured boiling oil and pitch. Ghost led the direwolves in the chaos outside the gates. Nymeria's pack fell upon the supply lines, tearing through the baggage trains, scattering horses and men. Shaggy Dog and Rickon slipped behind the lines, setting fires in the night. In the darkness, the howls rose and rose, a song of death and vengeance. Men broke and ran, driven mad by the thought of fangs in the snow. Jaime Lannister led the second assault himself, his white horse streaked with blood, his sword flashing. He reached the gates, only to find Arya waiting for him, her face masked, her blade thin as ice. They circled, swords ringing. Jaime's skill was unmatched, but Arya was a shadow, faster than wind, her eyes dead and cold. "I knew your father," Jaime gasped as their blades crossed. "He died with honor. You could too." "My father died for your queen's lies," Arya whispered, and struck low, feinting left, stabbing right. Her blade caught the joint of his armor, blood blossoming. He staggered, fell to one knee, golden hand clutching at his side. Arya stepped back, her breath steaming. "The North remembers," she said, and vanished into the storm. Jon stood atop the gatehouse, long claw in hand, watching the field churn with blood and fire. Men died screaming, and the snow was no longer white. The Lannisters pressed on, driven by desperation and pride, but the North held. The wolves struck again and again, breaking their lines, sowing terror. The Vale Knights sallied out, crashing into the flanks, Royce's men shouting their war cry. In the chaos, the Blackfish led a sortie, cutting a path through the baggage, burning the supplies. Seizing the gold meant to buy the loyalty of the Sellswards. Night fell, and the Lannister camp was in shambles. Fires raged unchecked. Men fled into the woods, only to vanish, never to be seen again. Sansa sent no quarter, and the drums of Winterfell beat through the dark. On the third day, the snow returned in earnest, blinding and cold. The Lannisters tried to withdraw, but the wolves harried them every step, the wildlings closing off every path north and west. In the end, only a remnant of Jaime's host escaped, slipping south with their battered banners and broken pride. The battlefield was a wasteland. Frozen corpses, half buried in the drifts. The wolves feasted for days, and the crows grew fat. In the aftermath, Sansa walked the field with Jon and Arya. The wind tugged at her cloak, cold and clean. She looked down at the bodies, at the broken swords, the ruined banners. "Is it done?" she asked softly. Jon looked to the horizon. "For now, the Lannisters will bleed. The Freys are broken, the Boltons are gone." Arya bent, cleaned her blade on the cloak of a dead knight. "It is never done." Rickon appeared from the woods, Shaggy Dog at his side. He was streaked with mud and blood, but grinning fiercely. "Winterfell stands," he said. Jon clapped a hand to his shoulder. "Winterfell stands." They returned to the castle, the banners of Stark flying high, the fires blazing. That night, they feasted in the great hall, not in triumph, but in remembrance. Sansa toasted the fallen, the lost, the living. Jon stood beside her, silent and strong. Arya faded into the shadows, her work not yet done. Bran listened to the old gods, his eyes closed, summer warm beside him. Rickon led the children in a howling chorus, a song for the dead and the living alike. Winter had come and broken against the stone of Winterfell. The north endured. The pack endured. And far to the south, in the halls of kings, men whispered that the age of lions and dragons was ending. The age of wolves had come again. Oh, Kay. In the heart of winter, the north glistened with the hard edge of a kingdom reforged by fire and blood. Every step across the frozen earth resounded with the weight of all that had been lost, and the certainty that the future, at last, belonged to wolves again. The banners of House Stark hung stiff in the cold air, rippling above battlements swathed in hoarfrost, the direwolf rampant and unbroken. Below, Winterfell pulsed with life, a city as much as a castle, crowded with those who had nowhere else to turn. A hush had settled over the land after the breaking of the Lannister host, a hush of exhaustion, of mourning, and of something close to awe. Yet beneath that hush, the north bristled, wary of peace, for all the old scars still ached, and the work of vengeance was not truly finished. The lords of the rivers and the hills clustered close, uneasy but loyal, each bound by oaths renewed in blood. The small folk gave thanks at their shrines, burning tokens to the old gods and to the memory of Ned, of Catelyn, of Robb. For Sansa, each morning began at the break of dawn, her cheeks pink with the cold, her mind already sifting through the matters of a kingdom half in ruins. Her solar became the true seat of power, a place of counsel, negotiation, and rule. Lords came to her with their grievances, a quarrel over land, a missing daughter, cattle stolen in the night. Pettier Baelish circled at the edges, watching her rise with a subtle, growing unease, as if each day she became less the girl he had thought to mold and more a force of her own. Sansa handled it all with an air of calm. Her voice never raised, her judgment firm but fair. Men who expected tears or softness found only the cool flame of stark resolve. The snows thickened, hemming in the world, and the walls themselves seemed to lean closer for warmth. Kitchens roared with fire. Bakers kneaded hard. Soldiers ate elbow to elbow with villagers and wildlings. Jon drifted from camp to camp, uniting old rivals with a word and a steady hand. No one called him Snow now, not even the men of the Night's Watch who trickled in from the wall, their faces hollow and grim. To them, he was Lord Stark, or simply, the Wolf. Ghost never left his side, gliding through the crowds like a pale wraith. More than once, the White Wolf's silent presence averted a fight before it began. Children watched Ghost and the other Direwolves with awe, following them at a distance, inventing stories that spread through the castle like wildfire. Some nights, Jon would catch Rickon in the stables or on the battlements, surrounded by a pack of ragged children, teaching them how to whistle to a wolf, how to move silently, how to read the tracks of a deer or fox in new fallen snow. Rickon was older now, his wildness shaped by grief but not tamed. He lived as much in the woods as within the walls, bringing in hares, ptarmigans, or a rare fat goose for the kitchens, and sometimes slipping away for days at a time, with Shaggy Dog and 2 or 3 orphaned boys. The people spoke his name in stories that blurred truth and legend. Some said he could run with wolves. Others that he could talk to the old gods themselves. When Rickon was in Winterfell, the children laughed louder, and the cooks roasted meat with fewer questions about where it had come from. Arya came and went as she pleased, as if the castle itself could no longer contain her. She slipped out into the woods with Nymeria and her wild pack, returned with scraps of southern news, new scars, and an air of restless purpose. Once she brought a pair of brothers from the ruined villages east of White Harbor. Boys no older than 10, both silent as stones, both marked by the loss of everything. Sansa set them to work in the kitchens. Arya taught them to use a blade, and soon enough their faces lost some of their fear. Bran rarely left the Godswood, even as the snow grew so deep that the trees themselves seemed to shrink. He spent long hours beneath the red leaves, his face pale as parchment, his eyes seeing into places no one else could fathom. Sometimes he would speak with Maester Wolkan or Samwell Tarly, who had come south from the Wall, drawn by rumors of what Bran was becoming. Sam would sit with Bran for hours, quill scratching at parchment, trying to learn the old stories, the old magics, the secrets of ravens and trees, and the things that lay beyond the world of men. Yet even Sam, with all his patience, could not truly understand the distance in Bran's gaze, the way he would sometimes shudder and speak words in voices not his own. The council met daily, sometimes twice. Sansa presided from her high-backed chair, Jon at her right, Manderly and Royce and the Blackfish at her left. Petyr Baelish tried his tricks, whispering poison, setting lords against each other, promising gold and power. But each time Sansa cut through him with words sharper than any blade. The North will not be divided again. She said one day, her eyes fixed on Baelish as the Blackfish watched with a smile. We know what Southern promises are worth. We have not forgotten. Men and she. The lords murmured their approval. Even Baelish could only bow and retreat, his fingers drumming restlessly at his lapel. Word came that the remnants of the Freys had holed up in the ruined towers along the Green Fork, praying for Lannister gold or a southern savior. The Riverlands, never fully tamed, burned with vengeance. Bandits and broken men wore stark badges or none at all, and the small folk whispered that Lady Stoneheart herself still hunted in the misty woods. Sansa sent ravens south, not for war, but for peace, promising that any Frey who laid down arms would be spared, so long as they swore a new oath and bent the knee to House Stark. Some took the offer, their hearts broken, their eyes downcast. Others vanished into the wilds, never to be seen again. Arya hunted some herself, her blade silent, her face veiled. For each man she slew, a red wolf's head was carved into the nearest tree, and the message spread. The North remembers. Jon walked the battlements each night, Longclaw at his hip, Ghost at his side. He watched the stars and the lines of torchlight that wound away from the gates, marking the roads cleared for patrols and hunters. He spoke to the men as they took their watch, speaking quiet words of courage and unity. Once, he found Sam at the edge of the wall, his breath fogging the air, eyes red from reading. "It's not over, is it?" Sam asked, not needing an answer. Jon shook his head. "Not while winter holds. Not while our enemies draw breath." Sam nodded, shifting his heavy cloak. "Bran, he's seen things. Things coming from the east, ships, dragons, fire and death." Jon gripped his friend's shoulder. "We've faced worse. We face it together." Dendor. In the Godswood, Sansa knelt before the heart tree as snow sifted down in silent curtains. Bran's voice was strange and distant. "They come, Sansa. Ships with black sails, wings in the night, Old debts, old wounds. She looked at her brother, the boy she'd nursed and soothed, now transformed into something ancient and unfathomable. Do we have the strength? The pack survives, Bran said. But the lone wolf dies. Remember. A few days later, horns sounded from the walls. Scouts had spotted ships off the coast. A great black fleet, sails taut in the wind, dragons gleaming in the cold sun. The rumor ran through Winterfell like wildfire. Daenerys Targaryen had come to the north. Her army camped near White Harbor, and her envoys rode north. Unsullied in shining armor, Dothraki riders, and Sir Davos Seaworth with a white banner. Sansa received them in the Great Hall, flanked by Jon and Arya, the direwolves lying restless at their feet. Davos bowed low, his voice rough as gravel. Her Grace offers peace, Lady Stark. She comes not to conquer, but to join. She seeks the North's friendship, not its obedience. Sansa listened to his words, reading the faces of those behind him. She saw pride and wariness, hunger and hope. We have seen what comes from the south, she said, her voice cool. We have suffered at the hands of those who sought only power. What does Daenerys Targaryen offer, except more dragons and more fire? Davos met her eyes. She offers her hand. She offers justice. She would rebuild what was broken. Jon stood, his eyes shadowed. I know the Queen. She's not Cersei Lannister. She fights for the living, not for her own gain. Arya watched silently, her hand resting on the hilt of her dagger. Bran said nothing, but the direwolves stirred. After the council, Sansa and Jon walked the snowy courtyard in the twilight, their breath rising in silver clouds. Can we trust her? Sansa asked. We must try, Jon replied. If dragons are coming, better they are our allies. Winter is not done with us, nor is war. That night, a feast was called. Daenerys arrived on a pale mare, her hair white as frost, her eyes shining. The hall was silent as she entered, the banners of Stark and Targaryen side by side for the first time in 100 years. She bowed to Sansa, to Jon, to the north. We are not so different, she said. Both born of loss, both made strong by fire and by ice. I come not as a conqueror, but as a friend. Sansa nodded, weighing the woman before her. The survivor, the exile, the queen. Then let us eat as friends, and see if trust can be built in the cold. The feast was a somber affair. The food was plain but plentiful. The wine flowed, but no one grew drunk. The lords of the north watched the Dragon Queen with open suspicion, while the wildlings eyed her Dothraki, and unsullied as one might eye dangerous beasts. Yet through the tension, there was a current of hope. Hope that the days of war might, at last, be ending. Afterward, Sansa and Daenerys walked the ramparts beneath the hard white moon. My house was slaughtered, Sansa said, her words a blade in the night. The Red Wedding, the sack of Winterfell, all of it in the name of Southern power. Why should the North bend to anyone now? Daenerys' voice was quiet. You should not bend. I will not ask it. The world is changing. Sansa Stark. I do not want a throne built on ashes and bones. I want peace. If you will have me, then Bemselor. They stood together in the cold, two women shaped by war and loss, searching for the path forward. Elsewhere in the castle, Arya found Jon in the old training yard, practicing with Longclaw beneath the torches. She is not the enemy, Arya said. But if she becomes one, Jon smiled grimly. If she becomes one, we do what wolves do. Days turned to weeks. Daenerys and her army remained, helping rebuild villages, sharing food and knowledge. The North thawed, just a little. Tensions flared, old grudges, deep hurts. But bit by bit, the pack and the dragon learned to work side by side. Bran watched the sky for ravens, the sea for ships, the woods for things colder than snow. He warned Sansa of omens in the wind, dreams of shadows that stretched beyond the wall. One night, as a storm battered the walls, A horn blew 3 times from the east watchtower. Men rushed to the battlements. In the darkness beyond the snow, shapes moved, tall and gaunt, with eyes like burning ice. The long night, whispered the old gods. The true enemy had come. Jon and Ghost led the men to the gates. Daenerys mounted Drogon and took to the air. Arya and Nymeria vanished into the black. The North, united at last. Wolves, dragons, men and women, wildlings and lords, all stood together beneath the banners of Stark and Targaryen, facing the darkness as one. And as the night deepened, the direwolves howled, and the pack stood unbroken. The North remembered. The North endured. The wind's howl drowned all lesser sounds on that longest night. Snow drove sideways in thick, icy sheets, muting the world in white. Winterfell's walls stood higher and grimmer than any memory, firelight flickering at every window, every gate, every tower. The air trembled with a tension beyond even war, a sense that the old stories had slipped their bonds, that the realm itself now hung on the knife edge of legend and oblivion. Outside the gates, the army of the living waited. Jon paced along the parapet, the bite of cold no longer a novelty, but a deep, familiar ache. Ghost padded silent as moonlight behind him. Hackles raised, eyes burning red in the torchlit dark. On the ramparts, archers from Bear Island, wildling spearwives, armored knights of the Vale, and ragged boys of the North all shared the same haunted stare. Men muttered prayers to the Seven, to the old gods, to nameless spirits of ice and fire. Far below, in the bailey, the direwolves prowled together. Ghost, Shaggy Dog, Nymeria with her wild kin, Summer at Bran's side, each a living omen, fierce and silent. Within the keep, Sansa moved through the halls with a lamp and a word for every child, every frightened woman. She had ordered the youngest and the oldest into the crypts beneath Winterfell. The old bones, their coldest, surest sanctuary. The corridors trembled with memory and anticipation. Maester Walken and Samwell Tarly went from chamber to chamber, carrying draughts of poppy, bundles of herbs, baskets of hard bread and apples, trying to bring comfort where there could be none. Arya melted from shadow to shadow, blade glinting at her hip, eyes watchful as a wolf's. She'd chosen her station at the highest tower, with an archer's bow and the cold wind as her only companion. It was not death that worried her. She'd met that too many times. But the thought of losing the pack, of standing alone once more. Bran waited in the Godswood beneath the heart tree. His mind drifted far, touching ravens winging in the blizzard, touching the trembling pulse of earth and ice. He saw the army of the dead as a shadow on the world, felt the cold logic of its hunger, sensed the will behind it, a force old as the first snows, as relentless as winter itself. Daenerys and her dragons crouched on the highest tower, Drogon's wings furled tight. Rhaegal coiled nearby, both beasts restless, rumbling, their eyes narrowed at the distant dark. The queen herself, clad in white and silver, wore no crown but the storm wind in her hair. She glanced often to Jon, sharing few words but many thoughts. A horn blew once, twice, thrice. Low, mournful, echoing across the fields. The dead had come. Out past the walls, the White Walkers led their silent host, moving through the storm with a slow inevitability. Blue eyes gleamed in empty sockets. Frozen banners snapped in the wind. Fallen men of House Umber, Karstark, even Bolton, all now pressed into one great army by the will of the Night King. The snow muffled everything but the thud of thousands of feet, the creak of ancient armor, the rasp of frozen weapons. Jon's voice, calm and hard, rang over the wall. Archers, light your arrows. Torches lifted, arrows kissed by flame. Across the line, men drew in ragged breaths, not knowing if they would see the sun again. Gendry, shoulders squared beside the blacksmith's forge, passed swords and axes still steaming from the anvil. Lyanna Mormont's small form strode the lines, her words sharper than any steel, the Bear Island men roaring their answer. The first wave hit like a tidal surge. The dead crashed against the stakes and ditches, surging over bodies, heedless of pain or loss. The archers loosed, flames arcing through the storm. Screams split the night, and men fell and rose again to join the horde. Wildlings and Northmen fought shoulder to shoulder. Vale knights stabbed from behind their shields, while the Direwolves launched themselves into the press, jaws and claws wet with death. Rickon, wild-eyed, moved in the chaos with Shaggy Dog, his axe flashing, the wolf always at his back. Above it all, the dragons shrieked. Drogon swept down, rivers of fire pouring from his jaws, melting hundreds at a pass. Rhaegal circled lower, scorching the snow to slush and bone. Daenerys rode Drogon with a terrible fury, her hair a streaming banner, her voice calling commands to the flames. The dead burned, but still they came. Jon found himself where the fighting was thickest, Longclaw hacking down whites as fast as they could climb the mounds of bodies. Ghost fought at his side, never faltering. Every time Jon risked a glance, he saw Arya moving like a shadow, her arrows finding only blue-eyed targets, her blade flickering in the storm. The battle became a blur of snow, steel, screams. The living gave ground, retreated to the second wall, then the third. The weight of numbers, overwhelming every hope. Through it all, Bran remained at the heart tree, eyes rolled white, his spirit wandering the blizzard. He sent crows swirling above the battlefield, darting between dragons and whites. He saw the Night King moving slowly through the carnage, his sword raised, his will suffusing the dead. Sansa and Sam directed the defense of the gates, their hands bloody from hauling wounded, their words keeping hope alive in the eyes of the desperate. Children wailed in the crypts. Old women prayed, clutching tokens of the first men. Through it all, the Stone Kings of Winterfell watched in silence. A gap opened at the western gate. Whites poured through. Sansa was there, dirk in hand, her voice ringing above the din. To me, the North remembers. Hold! The Manderley men rallied, fighting with axes and courage. Wildlings flooded the breach, Tormund's laughter echoing as he split skulls. Sansa fought, as her mother had, fierce and fearless. Sam, sword in hand, faced his nightmares and did not run. Above the carnage, Bran's vision reached out farther, to the heart of the blizzard, where the Night King stared at him with cold, endless hunger. A bond stretched between them, ancient, bitter, inevitable. Suddenly, the dead halted, as if waiting for some silent command. A soundless cold swept through the bailey, the snow itself freezing in midair. The Night King raised his sword, and the gates of Winterfell groaned and shuddered. In that instant, the dragons descended. Drogon and Rhaegal fell upon the Night King, fire blooming hot and bright. But the Night King strode through the flames, unburned, blue eyes locked on Bran beneath the heart tree. Jon, seeing the danger, sprinted for the Godswood, Ghost at his side. Arya was already there, having slipped behind the lines like wind through threads. She saw the Night King striding across the snow, his blade like a shard of midnight. Bran, his breath ghosting in the cold, murmured words in a language older than any song. The roots of the heart tree twisted, the ravens shrieked, and the direwolves howled together. Nymeria, Ghost, Shaggy Dog, Summer, rushing the Night King with teeth bared. He cut them aside as if they were no more than mist, frost blooming where his blade passed. The world narrowed to the Godswood, the heart tree's blood-red leaves trembling in the storm. Jon charged, screaming Bran's name, long claw raised. The Night King turned, blade meeting steel, and the two clashed in the snow. Jon fought with everything he had learned, every lesson from Ned and the wildlings, every sorrow, every hope. Ghost tore at the Night King's cloak. Nymeria snapped at his heels. But each time he struck, he seemed to become less real, more a thing of storm and hate. Arya darted from the shadows, her blade flashing. She aimed for his neck, but he caught her wrist, twisting with inhuman strength. For a heartbeat, blue eyes met gray, and Arya felt the void behind them, a night without end. But Bran's voice came, distant yet present. Now, Arya. She dropped her dagger from one hand to the other, the blade plunging deep into the Night King's heart. For a moment, time froze. Snow, men, wolves, all locked in a tableau of desperate hope. Then the Night King shattered, a storm of ice and shadow, and the dead fell as one. The silence was absolute. The wind died. The world seemed to pause, waiting for some new command. In the bailey, Jon knelt in the blood and snow, gasping, Ghost leaning against him. Arya fell to her knees beside Bran, her breath steaming, her eyes wide with something like awe. Sansa, bloodied and shaking, stood at the breached gate, staring at the still forms of the Whites. Tormund's laughter faded. Sam wept, sword falling from his hand. The living looked to the sky. Dawn broke at last, cold, pale, but real. The snow eased. Dragons circled above the towers, their cries echoing in the light. The North had survived the longest night. Winterfell's dead were gathered, each body blessed with a name and a memory. The survivors wept and sang and feasted together, not for victory but for endurance. Children wandered the halls, touching the wolves, whispering thanks to Arya and Jon and Daenerys and Sansa. That night, beneath a sky scrubbed clean by wind and tears, the Stark siblings gathered in the Godswood. Jon embraced Arya, pride and sorrow warring in his face. Sansa held Bran's hand, her own trembling. Rickon howled with the Direwolves, a wild, pure sound that echoed beyond the walls. Daenerys stood at Jon's side, her eyes on the heart tree, her voice soft. "We are not so different, wolves and dragons." Sansa smiled, weary but unbroken. "We are North now, all of us." Bran's voice was a thread of prophecy. "The old magic sleeps for now. The long night is ended. But winter will always come. Remember, remember." The council that followed was brief. The dead were burned, the wounded tended, the walls rebuilt. Sansa and Daenerys planned the rebuilding of the North and the Riverlands. Jon sent ravens to every corner of the kingdom. The pack had endured. The world had not ended in darkness. Arya vanished again, riding west with Nymeria, chasing rumors of new dangers. Bran sat beneath the heart tree, watching the crows wheel in the clean blue sky. Rickon slipped into the woods, his laughter mingling with the howls of the Direwolves. Winter had not broken them. The North remembered. The pack, reforged in blood and fire and old magic, endured. And when the snow fell again, it fell on banners of gray and silver, on children learning to howl, on a castle filled with hope. It fell on wolves running in the wild, on dragons soaring above a land made whole. The age of wolves had come, and in the North, the songs began anew. Oh, ah. After the storm of the long night, after the breaking of the dead, and the shattering of the Night King, the world did not wake to sunshine or song. Instead, the snow kept falling, steady and soft, as if the earth itself needed time to cleanse the blood from its veins. The fires in Winterfell's halls burned lower, their warmth a faint, defiant glow against the immensity of cold and loss that filled the battered stronghold. But the silence was different now. A silence not of dread, but of weary relief, of hope waiting to be rebuilt. In the quiet, every echo in the stone spoke of those who had not survived. Sansa felt their presence with every step, saw their faces in the shadows by every hearth. Old retainers, wildling mothers, boys barely grown into men, her own kin and friends. She kept her mourning private. There was work to do, and the living leaned on her in ways that surprised even herself. She wore a simple cloak of thick, dark wool, and moved through the castle each morning as if she'd always been its heart. The first weeks after the battle were given to grief and to healing. Sansa convened the council in the solar, though the faces around the table were changed. The blackfish had fallen at the gate. Sword in hand, Lyanna Mormont had not yielded the walls even in death. Her body carried on a shield and laid among the kings below the crypts. Many lesser lords and nameless smallfolk filled the lists of the dead. But the survivors, Jon, Arya, Rickon, Sam, Tormund, Jon Royce, Davos, and Daenerys, met beneath her steady gaze, each changed by the storm. Jon wore his scars openly now, a new white streak above his brow. The wild darkness in his eyes lessened only when Ghost pressed close at his feet. He said little in council, but his presence alone kept tempers cool. The wildlings, who had lost many, deferred to him as to a chief, and the Northmen who had once doubted him gave way in silence, knowing what he had faced beneath the heart tree. Arya, ever restless, drifted from council to courtyard, from rampart to Godswood, always at the edge of things. She was less a shadow than before. Somehow both more open and more distant. Her name was spoken in awe and fear. Even the seasoned warriors shivered at the memory of her dance with the Night King. Nymeria, wild and immense, was never far from her side, a legend given flesh. Bran, paler and thinner, seemed always cold, his body wrapped in furs, though he felt little of the world's touch now. He sat by the heart tree or in the solar, his gaze distant, offering counsel that sometimes made sense, sometimes seemed a riddle. Sansa listened to him more than she let on, finding in his strange words hints of danger, warnings of things that moved in the world beyond what anyone could see. Rickon grew taller by the day, lean and wild, his face wind-chapped and fierce. He preferred the open air, the kennels, the forest's edge, and spent as much time with the wolves as with men. He led bands of orphans and wildlings out to hunt, to bring back hares and deer for the kitchens, teaching the youngest to track and hide and run. Daenerys was the newest shadow in Winterfell's halls. Her dragons, Drogon and Rhaegal, kept to the skies and the far fields, hunting stags and elk where the woods remained untouched by the dead. Daenerys herself attended council with quiet dignity, learning the ways of the North, sometimes walking the yards with Jon, sometimes seeking Sansa in the solar to speak of rebuilding. Her hair grew longer in the cold, her cheeks flushed by the northern wind, but she remained unmistakably Targaryen. Fire in her blood, purpose in every movement. The first order of the council was burial and remembrance. Great pyres burned outside the walls for those who could be claimed, their smoke twisting into the sky, a silent promise that the living would not forget the dead. The crypts were opened to take in the fallen of noble blood. Songs were sung for Lyanna Mormont and the Blackfish, for the men of Bear Island, for the Spearwives, and for the smiths and scullions and children who would never see another summer. Then came the reckoning with the South. Ravens flew to every lord and lady, carrying tidings of victory and warning. The North would not kneel. Sansa's letters were carefully worded, neither threat nor plea, but statement of fact. She promised peace to those who left the North unmolested, justice to those who tried to claim it. Few dared reply. In King's Landing, Cersei Lannister sat the throne, her grip weak but her vengeance poisonous. The news of the Night King's defeat came wrapped in the fear of dragons and wolves united. Even the Golden Lions knew better than to rush northward now. In White Harbor, Lord Manderly declared for Sansa and Jon. The Crannogmen sent word of fealty, their boats ferrying smoked fish and wild onions to the castle. The Vale, with Royce and his knights, pledged to see out the winter at Winterfell's side. The Riverlands, half ruined, half free, simmered with rumors of Lady Stoneheart's vengeance against the last Freys and Lannister men. Spring seemed a myth, but the survivors planned for it all the same. The castle was patched, the outer walls rebuilt with timber and stone from ruined villages. Men were sent to replant the winter fields, to tend the surviving cattle. Sansa and Sam led lessons for the youngest. Letters, numbers, tales of the North and its history, all with an eye toward the world to come. At night, the great hall filled with life again. Men and women crowded the benches, sharing bread and salt, their laughter ragged but real. Jon would sometimes sing an old song with Tormund and Davos. Rickon played games with the youngest, letting Shaggy Dog and Ghost race through the shadows, the children howling with delight. Arya told tales of Braavos and the Hound and the road west, her words dark but her eyes alive with memory. Daenerys sometimes joined them, drinking strong northern ale and speaking quietly to those who had lost the most. The wildlings admired her, the Northmen eyed her warily, but her dragons protected the flocks, and her gifts silver, grain, medicines brought by the Dothraki earned her a grudging respect. The world outside the walls did not rest. Word came that Cersei Lannister's armies, weakened by desertion and rebellion, had been pushed back to the gold roads and the passes of the Reach. In the Far East, rumors whispered of new kings rising and old dragons stirring. The North, for the first time in a generation, was whole and watched from afar. In the Godswood, Bran dreamed waking dreams. The old gods were silent now, their power sated by the price that had been paid. Still, he listened to the wind, the roots, the wings of ravens. Sometimes, he glimpsed Arya far to the west, riding through green hills beyond the sunset, Nymeria at her side. Sometimes, he saw Jon and Daenerys walking the wall, their words soft and unfinished. He saw Rickon, running with wolves, and Sansa, wrapped in furs, writing letters by candlelight, her face calm and unbowed. In time, the dragons became a familiar part of the land. Their shadows swept across the fields, frightening some, thrilling others. Rhaegal nested in the ruined castle at Last Hearth, his cries echoing for miles. Drogon ranged farther, sometimes seen above the smoking sea, sometimes hunting alone along the White Knife. The children learned to tell them apart by silhouette, as they once did the stars. Jon and Daenerys became leaders in their own right. Their bond, forged in fire and battle, was unspoken but clear. Jon worked with the wildlings to rebuild the watchtowers along the wall, fearing the day some new darkness might rise. Daenerys met with Sansa and the lords, organizing the new order. Justice for all, law and custom respected, peace held not by fear, but by honor. The pack, though changed, endured. The Starks took their meals together in the old solar, laughter mingling with silence. Sansa listened to Arya's stories, counseled Jon on diplomacy, humored Rickon's wildness, and took Bran's words to heart, even when she did not understand them. It was a year before the first green shoot pierced the snow. The whole castle gathered in the yard to see it, one fragile stalk pushing through the frozen earth, the promise of spring. Sansa knelt and touched it, her face wet with tears she did not try to hide. The thaw came slow, but it came. The streams ran free again, and birds returned to the woods. The fields filled with color. The river lords came north to swear fealty at Winterfell. The Vale men pledged their swords anew. The wildlings moved into abandoned villages, making them their own. The Direwolves roamed the land, guardians and legends. The North's strength made flesh. In the years that followed, the tale of the avenging wolves was sung from Skagos to White Harbor, from the Neck to the Last Hearth. Sansa Stark became the Lady of Winter, beloved for her wisdom, and for the fire she'd kindled in the heart of her people. Jon led the watch and the wildlings, keeping the peace along the wall and beyond. Arya vanished west, her legend growing with every season. Rickon grew into a lord as wild as the wolfswood, never tamed, always true. Bran remained in the Godswood, the memory of the world, his eyes on distant storms. And so, as the North healed and the old wounds faded, the world moved forward. The shadows of the Red Wedding were banished at last, not by one sword, but by the pack united, by the memory that would not die. Direwolves still haunted the night, their howls answered by children's laughter and the sigh of the wind through ancient trees. Winter had ended, and in its passing, the North remembered. The pack endured, and where Direwolves and Starks walked, no southern lord would ever again forget what it meant to draw the North's blood. Unusual activity has been detected from your device. Try again later. 9,440 Fiban Efsarad 72ad. As the years slipped onward, the North flourished anew beneath the wolf's banner, stubborn and wild, beautiful in its scars. The memories of the long night and the Red Wedding never faded entirely from Winterfell's stones, but they were transformed, not merely wounds, but the bedrock of the new age. The world beyond the Neck watched the North with a wary respect, for no realm that had withstood death itself could ever again be called weak. Winterfell's towers gleamed with banners sewn by the hands of survivors, bearing direwolves and mermen, sunbursts and eagles. Even the dragon of Daenerys, hers now the red of hearthfire, not the red of war, The castles once ruined, keeps now sheltered not only lords and ladies, but smiths from White Harbor, herdsmen from the Frostfangs, freedmen and wildlings, whose names would one day fill sagas sung by harpers in the south. On the wall, black brothers still kept their lonely vigil, but the wildlings who'd once warred with them now lived as kin, rebuilding shattered villages in the Gift and learning new ways from the Northmen. Joan's reforms had turned the Night's Watch from a prison into a brotherhood of all the free folk, a bulwark, not just against darkness, but against the temptations of power and division. John himself became less of a figure and more of a myth. Some days he was seen at the head of a great hunt in the Wolf's Wood, Ghost stalking beside him and wildlings trailing in his wake. Other days, he met in council with Sansa and Daenerys, heads bent over maps, planning trade with Bravos, or the rebuilding of Oldcastle, or the justice for a wronged crofter. Jon never sought a crown, but men still called him the White Wolf, and even the proudest lords of the Vale lowered their voices in his presence. Sansa ruled as Lady of Winterfell, and gradually as Queen in the North, the title bestowed by acclamation on a spring day when the old gods' leaves unfurled new and bright. The crown she wore was simple, a silver circlet with a single carved wolf's head. Her reign was marked by long hours in the solar, quills scratching across parchment, a steady stream of envoys from the Riverlands, the Vale, even from the Reach and Dorne. No one forgot the strength that had pulled them through the long night, or the mercy she showed to even her enemies. Children thrived in the yards and halls, learning their letters by day and howling their allegiance to the old gods at dusk. Sansa's laws forbade vengeance killings, forbade the taking of hostages. Peace was enforced not by fear but by the unbreakable pact of the Pack. When disputes flared, as they always did in the North, it was Sansa herself who heard the cases, her judgments fair and shrewd, never cruel. She trusted her council, and they trusted her in turn. Arya was seldom seen for more than a season at a time, for her feet had learned the itch of distant horizons. She rode alone, or with Nymeria's pack, west as far as the Sunset Sea, south as far as the Dornish sands. She sent back odd gifts, an obsidian blade from Skagos, a pearl from the Lonely Light, a song she'd learned in Old Town, and always news of the wider world. Yet she never lost her way home. Sometimes, a direwolf's howl at the edge of the Wolf's Wood would herald Arya's return. The children would whisper that she walked with shadows and spoke with the dead. Old servants said she could still vanish at will. Sansa greeted her as a lost star returned to the night sky, with love and laughter and secret tears. Rickon grew straight and strong, wildness worn with the confidence of a lord. He learned the speech of wildlings and small folk, and in time took a bride from the new Gift, a girl of the woods with fierce green eyes and a wit to match his own. Their children tumbled with wolf pups in the snow, their howls echoing across the godswood. Rickon rebuilt the kennels and founded a new order of wardens for the forests, wild and loyal as their lord. His bond with Shaggy Dog became legend, the stories growing with every year. That he once rode the wolf through the snows to rescue a lost hunting party. That he could track a man across Bear Rock. That the wolves came to him when he called, no matter where they roam. Bran remained the quiet center of it all. He never again left the north, but ravens brought him word of everything that mattered. Sometimes he joined the council, offering advice or warning. Sometimes he wandered the Godswood, Summer pacing at his side. Some called him the Greenseer, others, the memory of the world. His presence reminded all who visited Winterfell that the land was watched, the old powers still respected. Even as new shrines to the Seven sprang up in the rebuilt villages, the heart trees stood inviolate, their faces red and ancient, their roots tangled with legend. The dragons became a part of the land's rhythm. In summer, they soared high above the fields, their shadows rippling across the barley and oats. Rhaegal nested near the White Knife, his presence keeping bandits and poachers from the woods. Drogon flew farther, sometimes not seen for months, but always returning at the turn of the season to circle Winterfell and roar his greeting. Children played at dragon riders in the Bailey, their laughter a sign of peace longed for. And finally one. Daenerys remained in the north, her hair grown long and woven with beads of glass and jet. She became a symbol of the new order, not as conqueror, but as friend and foster mother, healing old wounds between dragon and wolf. She and Sansa worked side by side, sharing burdens, forging laws that brought together wildlings and Northmen, riverlords and crannogmen. When Sansa's daughter was born, Daenerys stood as godmother, and the child's name, Lyanna Rhaenys Stark, became a promise of unity. Fire and ice joined forever in the north. In the years of plenty that followed, White Harbor became a bustling port, trading furs, timber, iron, and even dragonglass with distant lands. The crannogmen sent boats laden with eels and moss, and the mountain clans brought sheep and silver for the castle. The reach of Winterfell extended not by conquest, but by the loyalty freely given by those who remembered. No red wedding could be repeated, not while the pack stood together. On the day that marked 10 years since the fall of the Night King, Winterfell hosted a great gathering. A feast for lords and free folk alike, the tables groaning with game and bread and tankards of strong ale. Stories were told until the candles burned low. Arya spun tales of her voyages to islands beyond the maps. Rickon led the children in howling contests. Bran presided from the high seat, his voice rarely raised but always heated. That night, when the hall had emptied and the fires banked low, Sansa climbed the stairs to the old solar. She found Jon there, gazing out over the snow-silvered yard, Ghost at his feet. "They are happy," Jon said quietly, not turning. "Yes," Sansa replied, sitting beside him. "But peace is not only for them. You are allowed it too." Jon smiled, a rare warmth. "I have it, Sansa. I see it in the faces of the children. I hear it in the way the wolves sing at dusk." Outside, the moon shone on Winterfell, casting long blue shadows. For a moment, the castle seemed unchanged since the days of their childhood. Then Sansa leaned her head on Jon's shoulder, and he rested his hand over hers, and they were simply brother and sister, two survivors among many. Arya stood in the godswood, feeling the cold against her skin, listening to the wind in the leaves. Rickon passed her, Shaggy Dog trailing him, and together they watched as summer dozed at the roots of the heart tree. Bran's eyes were closed, his dreams a tapestry of past and future. Daenerys walked the outer wall, her eyes turned toward the stars. Drogon roared in the distance, and the sound was answered by a chorus of howls from the kennels, the woods, the wild hills. All through Winterfell, torches burned, their light reflected in 1,000 eyes. Human and wolf and dragon, each part of a pack that would not be broken. In the end, the Red Wedding was not simply avenged by blood, but by the enduring strength of the Starks united, by the Direwolves who roamed the wild, by children's laughter and the promise of spring. The North remembered, the North endured, and under banners old and new, beneath stars cold and beautiful, the Age of Wolves outlasted all that would threaten it, forevermore. In the deepening years that followed, the North found a rhythm that was as old as the land itself, and yet newly born. The snows returned, each winter a little less cruel than the last, and each spring brought shoots brighter, fields fuller, laughter louder in the yards of Winterfell. The ghosts of loss that once haunted the halls now lingered only in songs and in stories told beside the fires, their sorrow sweetened by memory and hope. What once had been vengeance and survival had become something gentler, a slow knitting together of wounds until only scars remained. Sansa's reign as queen in the North grew into legend, not because she ruled with an iron fist, but because she listened, because she saw every heart as worthy of tending. She walked the corridors in simple gowns, no more and no less than the people she served. She met often with the wildlings, learning the old tongue and the names of every clan child who found shelter within Winterfell's walls. To the south, she was a puzzle, neither conqueror nor supplicant, neither cold as her lands nor fiery as her dragonborn counselor, but some balanced thing, as unyielding as ice and as open as sky. The council chamber, once a war room, became the pulse of northern life. There, Sansa met with Jon and Daenerys, with Rickon and his wildling wife, with Arya when she wandered home, and with the elders of every village from White Knife to Deepwood Motte. The lords of the Vale and the Riverlands sent their sons and daughters to serve as pages and companions, strengthening the ties that bound the north to the rest of Westeros. There were disputes, of course, cattle stolen, boundaries crossed, tempers flared over trade and custom, but justice was swift and impartial. Sansa never allowed an old grievance to fester. Her judgments were clear and kind, her punishments sharp when they needed to be, but never cruel. Jon found contentment not in a crown, but in the quiet work of rebuilding and uniting. He roamed from the wall to the farthest crofter's village, a quiet shadow in black and gray, ghost always with him. He hunted in the wilds with Tormund and the children of the free folk, teaching them the ways of the woods and the old gods. He listened to their stories, learned their songs, and wove their wildness into the fabric of the north. In time, the wildlings became as loyal to House Stark as any clan from the mountains or Holdfast in the Riverlands. The wall was no longer a prison, but a sanctuary, a symbol that boundaries need not divide. Daenerys, now more Northwoman than Dragon Queen, grew into her place beside Sansa and Jon. She walked the market stalls in White Harbor and laughed with children in the streets. Her dragons, older, more sedate, became protectors of the land, rarely seen but always remembered in tales. Rhaegal lingered on the coast, fishing the cold seas and sunning himself on rocky cliffs, his massive wings folding and unfurling with the slow confidence of a creature content. Drogon, when he appeared, was a streak of black and red fire against the sky, a living myth. Sometimes Daenerys rode him, not as a conqueror, but as a guardian, circling high above the fields at planting time, or gliding low over the river to watch the sturgeon leap. The children of Winterfell grew in strength and wisdom. Lyanna Rhaenys Stark, Sansa's daughter and Daenerys' godchild, became a symbol of the new North. She ran wild in the yards with Rickon's brood, her hair a tumble of auburn and silver, her laughter bright. She rode horses as easily as she read books, learned the sword and the spindle with equal zeal. Her closest companion was a young direwolf, midnight gray and fiercely loyal, the pair inseparable in all mischief. Together, they led bands of children on wild chases through the woods, reenacting the battles and legends that shaped their world. Rickon and his wife Halla raised their children as half-wolf, half-wildling. The pack they kept in the kennels was famous throughout the realm. Gray and black, white and russet, everyone descended from the great Direwolves who'd once saved Winterfell. Visitors came from as far as Sunspear and Oldtown to see the wolf boys of the north, to marvel at their skill and their joy. Bran's presence was quieter but no less vital. He seldom left the Godswood, his body growing frail, but his eyes ever deeper. He listened to the roots, to the ravens, to the voices that rode the wind. When people sought counsel, they found him beneath the red leaves, summer always near, and left with a sense that their problems, no matter how tangled, were somehow part of something larger and older. Some said he could see a storm days before it reached the wall, or sense a birth or death long before the news came to Winterfell. Bran's words, always simple, always precise, shaped the course of many lives. Arya's comings and goings became a kind of ritual. She might be gone for months, riding west to the great islands or south to the free cities. She sent letters and gifts, stories written in a quick, bold hand, but she always returned for the longest night, slipping in with Nymeria at her side, bringing strange treasures and stranger tales. Children waited at the gate for her stories of faraway places, and old men nodded to her in respect, remembering the girl she had been and the woman she had become. At each year's end, Winterfell held a feast, a night of fire and song and remembrance. The great hall filled with laughter and music, the walls hung with banners old and new. Manderleys and Umbers, Glovers and Mormonts, Wildlings and Riverlanders, all broke bread together. Sansa presided, raising a toast to the living and the dead, her eyes shining with pride and sorrow. Daenerys sat beside her, regal and calm. Jon flanking her, his gaze distant but warm. Bran and Rickon shared stories, and Arya danced with the children, her feet as light as snow. This was the North remade, not by war, but by the will to endure and the courage to forgive. The scars of the Red Wedding and the long night were not erased, but made sacred. The Godswood flourished, sap running bright beneath the bark. and the old gods watched with silent approval as new generations played beneath their boughs. News from the south came less often, and with less weight. King's Landing endured its own troubles, kings and queens rising and falling, none able to breach the unity that Sansa and her pack had wrought. Once, an envoy from the capital arrived, a clever girl with Lannister gold in her hair, hoping to negotiate trade. She was treated with courtesy and sent home with stories of wolves and dragons, her purse heavy and her heart changed. Trade with Braavos brought coin and craftsmen, timber and furs traveled south, and rare books and spices came north. The mummers of Pentos performed in Winterfell's yard, and the halls rang with their laughter. A Sept was built beside the old god's wood, not in competition, but as a sign of a north that embraced difference. And always, the wolves ran. Nymeria's lion grew wild in the woods, their howls echoing each night. Shaggy Dog's descendants protected the herds in the new gift. Ghost-fathered litters that roamed from White Harbor to the Shadow Tower. The bond between Wolf and Stark became a thing of reverence and legend. Children born under the Direwolf banner were said to be brave and loyal, quick to laugh and slow to forget a friend. Sometimes, on the coldest nights, Sansa would wake and walk the ramparts. The castle slept below, fires flickering in every window, the great weirwood glowing with the memory of 10,000 years. She would see Jon, older now but unbowed, walking the wall with Ghost, Daenerys in the Godswood, silver hair glinting in the moonlight, Rickon's children racing in the snow, Arya's silhouette at the gate, a promise that adventure was never far away, and Bran, a silent watcher among the roots. Peace was never perfect. Storms came, crops failed, tempers flared. There were still threats from beyond. Ships from the Sunset Sea, old grudges stirring in the wild places, whispers of new sorceries rising in the far south. But the pack endured. The Direwolves howled. The children of Winterfell learned the old stories and made new ones, bright and fierce. And so the Red Wedding, that wound which once threatened to end the North, became instead the seed of its greatest strength. United, the Starks were unbreakable. Avenged by wolf and kin, healed by love and time, the North stood for all the world to see, a place of courage, sorrow, laughter, and hope. In time, the world forgot the names of kings and usurpers, but not the legend of the pack that endured. In the heart of Winterfell, beneath boughs heavy with snow and stars, the North remembered, and would remember, always.